Chapter 2, Traits, Behaviors, and Relationships. This chapter is going to go into various traits that leaders have, how they behave with their followers or employees, and how important it is to maintain good relationships with those employees. So let's jump in here. We're going to look at the personal traits and characteristics associated with effective leaders. Identify your own traits, and this will also be done through our type focus assessment. Will give you a good insight into some of your traits. And distinguish among various roles leaders play in organizations. Sometimes they are collaborators, sometimes they are advisors, other times they are more in a top-down type of management position. Recognize autocratic versus democratic leadership, and we're going to go through people-oriented and task-oriented leadership. Understand theory of individualized leadership and describe the key characteristics of entrepreneurial leaders. So these are the learning outcomes for this chapter. Once you have a good understanding of these objectives, you'd be in a great place to write the quiz and be prepared to do the midterm following the chapters that we'll be covering before the midterm. So traits, the distinguishing personal characteristics of a leader, such as intelligence, honesty, self-confidence, and appearance, are all important traits any good leader should have. The great man approach, we talked about this in chapter 1, and some people believe that these traits are inherited, they cannot be learned, and they really distinguish the difference between people who are born as leaders that have these traits and other people that are just not cut out for it. Some characteristics of good leaders, personal characteristics, intellectual and ability characteristics, personality, social characteristics, work-related characteristics, and social background. So you can see all of these traits and characteristics make a good, well-rounded leader. Having said that, not every leader possesses all of these characteristics. Everyone has weaknesses and places they need to improve. But this is just a general list of some of the things that good leaders possess in terms of characteristics. So good leaders are optimistic, they're self-confident, they're honest, they have integrity, and they have drive. So these are some key characteristics of all good leaders. Know your strengths. Again, this is part of the purpose of us doing the type focus assessment, so you can really get to know yourself and know what strengths you have and where you need to improve. A leader does not need to have all of the skills to handle every problem. This is why interdependence is so important. You should be able to work with others. You should be able to hire and train followers that will kind of fill the gaps in terms of your weaknesses and where you may not have those strengths. A strength is a natural talent or ability that has been supported and reinforced with learned knowledge and skills. So here's an idea that it may be a natural talent, but it needs to be reinforced and improved through learning and developing the skills. Matching strengths with roles. So this is really interesting. There's different roles of leaders. If you're in more of an operational role as a leader, which is vertically oriented, kind of a top-down thing, there's a list at the bottom of the slides of traits that good operational leaders have, right? They focus on results, they're self-confident, they're assertive, they can translate knowledge into vision, as opposed to a collaborative role. A collaborative leader, which is more of a horizontal role, meaning they're more of like a team member, right? It's not top down. It's not like you need to do this at this time. It's like, here's a problem, let's tackle it together. These types of leaders are generally project managers. They have people skills, they're good at building relationships, and they're proactive and flexible, which is much different than a top-down type leader. And then here is a third type of leader. This is advisory role, someone who provides guidance or support. So these types of leaders have people skills, the ability to influence others, and they have a high level of honesty and integrity. So depending on the organization and your role in the organization, your job as a leader might change, and therefore your strengths and skills should be suited towards that role. So some leaders would be good in some roles and they would struggle in others, depending on what was asked of them. So here's just a diagram of the three types of leadership roles. There's the vertical, right? And there's an example would be a divisional president. It's up and down, kind of in the red box. Horizontal, we're moving to the middle, and that's more of a project manager. And then advisory, which would be, human resources. So those are the three types of leaders. So here we're going to jump into the behavior approaches, autocratic versus democratic. So an autocratic leader has centralized authority, meaning that they're in a position of power and control, and they essentially tell everyone what to do and how to do it. Democratic roles or leaders delegate authority, right? They encourage people to participate. They rely on the knowledge and skills of other people, and that effective subordinates possess decision-making skills. So you need people in these roles that can make decisions when it comes to democratic leadership. It's not very effective being a democratic leader if the followers or subordinates, people that are working under you, cannot make their own decisions, right? So someone who's not a very good decision maker would do well with an autocratic leader, because that person is telling him what to do and how to do it and when to get it completed. And then someone who possesses a very good level of independent decision making would be better in a democratic role. So it is a continuum. As you can see in this diagram, most bosses probably fall somewhere in the middle. On the left-hand side, you see a boss-centered leadership, and essentially they use authority to manage and they make all the decisions. And then on the far right is subordinate-centered leadership, meaning that subordinates do all the work or followers do all the work and they make all the decisions. So most leaders are somewhere along this continuum, depending on the organization and people's role in that organization. So Ohio State did a study, and they developed a questionnaire called the Behavior Description Questionnaire, and they asked all of these companies a number of questions. And the research resulted in two categories of leadership: consideration and initiating structure. Consideration is the extent to which a leader is sensitive to subordinates or followers and respects their ideas and feelings and establishes mutual trust. That is consideration. Initiating structure is the extent to which a leader is task-oriented and directs the followers to work on activities towards an achieved goal. And of course, you probably want a balance. You want a balance of being able to understand people, listen to their ideas, but then you still want to be able to complete tasks and offer direction. The University of Michigan did a similar study, and they came up with employee-centered leaders versus job-centered leaders. An employee-centered leader focuses on the human needs of their followers or subordinates, and a job-centered leader directs the activity. They want efficiency, they want to cut costs, they're all about scheduling and goals. So both universities, their research demonstrated similar types of leaders, although they're labeled a little bit differently. The main idea is the same, right? We have people that lead and they understand the people they work with and really get them, and they develop relationships, versus ones that are more about getting tasks done and they care less about who people are and what they think, and they're more concerned about the bottom line. So the leadership grid is a two-dimensional leadership model and describes the majority of leadership styles based on both the concern for people and the concern for production, right? These are the two kind of variables that all leaders have to play with. They need to get the job done at the end of the day, but then they also need to treat the people they work with as human beings and show them that they value them and their opinion and their skills. I won't go into too much detail with this grid. As you can see, there's a lot of information there. I would encourage you to read it in more depth in the textbook about how these various leadership styles are kind of divided. But you can see just a general overview. This concern for people is on this axis from low to high, and then concern results is on this axis from low to high. And you have the country club management here versus the authority compliance management, and then the ones in between, right, and in the middle of the road. And you can imagine if you are not very concerned about people and you're more concerned about results, you'd be over here. And if you're the opposite, you'd be up here. Themes of leadership. We talked about this a little bit. You have people-oriented behaviors versus task-oriented behavior. And then there's the research from the various universities and how they broke down the leadership roles. Individualized leadership is a theory based on the notion that leaders develop a unique relationship with each subordinate or group, which determines how the leader behaves towards that group. So they may behave differently based on how the relationship is formed with different groups and different individuals within the organization. So stages of development, you can see in the top left-hand corner, the vertical dyad linkage, and that's leaders' behaviors and traits have different effects across different followers, creating groups that are in groups and out groups. So that's the first step. And then we move on to the second step, which is leader-member exchange, and then partnership building, right? Leaders can reach out and create a positive exchange with every subordinate by step 3, and doing so increases performance. The vertical dyad linkage model, a model of individualized leadership that argues the importance of a dyad formed by the leader with each member of the group. And they have 2 groups, in groups and out groups. So essentially the leader performs or develops an in-group relationship, and they've seen among members who leaders spend a disproportionate amount of time. So there are certain groups in organizations in which leaders might gravitate towards, connect with better, understand better, and they spend more time with these groups. And then there's out-group relationships, seen among members of groups who did not experience a sense of trust and extra consideration. Groups that maybe the leader did not connect with as well, that they did not spend as much time, and that their depth of relationships was not as good as the in-group relationship sections of that organization. Leadership behavior towards in-group and out-group. So you can see that in-group subordinates have a certain type of behavior that's very supportive, that the leader listens to them, that they give them very interesting assignments, and they praise them. And then the out-of-group, they show little consideration, they don't show much interest, and they usually are more top-down with those types of groups. So the leader-member exchange, individualized leaders model that explores how a leader-member's relationships develop over time and how the quality of the exchange of those leaderships affects outcomes. So you can imagine people who have a better relationship with their leader, who have more quality time and quality exchange, will often perform better than ones that feel like they're in the out-group, ones that they do not connect with well. Like, you don't want to be working hard for someone that you don't think cares about you or that you don't feel a connection with. On the other hand, if you feel like they care about you and you're very connected with them, you're willing to work a little bit harder. Leaders form high quality relationships with all followers. High quality relationships lead to better results, and followers provide assistance for high performance and participate in and influence decisions. So that's just basically what I went through, that if you form high quality relationships with followers, it translates to high performance. And entrepreneurial traits and behaviors, as most of you are well aware, entrepreneurship is an exciting part of being in business. And entrepreneurship requires a certain type of traits and behaviors is different than if you were working in an organization, right? Entrepreneurs need to have vision. They need the ability to get people excited and on board. They need to be flexible, open to feedback. They need to adapt and learn, and they need to be persistent and execute. And that's a much different role than maybe a manager in an organization in which everything is already set out for them. So that is a brief overview of Chapter 2. I would encourage you to spend a bit more time reading through the textbook to ensure you understand these concepts in depth. And if you have any questions about any of that information, please do not hesitate to reach out and ask.